They say living well is the best revenge. But what if the best revenge isn't revenge at all? We've all got that one person from our past, don't we? The one who made us feel small. The one we occasionally dream of meeting again, just to show them how far we've come. It's a powerful, deeply human belief, the idea that one day, the tables will turn. But the story you're about to hear challenges that entire notion, proving that sometimes, the most shocking outcome is the one nobody sees coming. Get ready for a story that begins when a completely honest mechanic gets a costly job on a supercar, the kind of job that could change his whole year. But the moment the client walks in, his world is turned upside down. The client was his old bully, the very person who made his school days a living nightmare. And now she's a rich heir who doesn't even recognize him. It's a moment dripping with the potential for payback, a chance to finally settle a score that has been simmering for over a decade. This isn't just a story about fixing a car. It's a story about fixing the past. Well, see Joe Ray, a man who built his life on integrity, and Rebecca Hayes, a woman who inherited a world of privilege but lost her way. When her world breaks down, she unknowingly turns to the one person she once tried to break. He has to make a choice between vengeance and a strange, unexpected kindness that could lead to his own redemption. The central conflict here is a battle for the soul. And trust me when I say, the final bill will leave you speechless. This is the story of how a mechanic got a costly job. Client was his old bully, now a rich heir, and the bill shocked everyone. The price of the repair had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the heart. It's an emotional journey about overcoming our deepest wounds and discovering that our destiny is often found in the last place we'd ever think to look. So before we dive into this incredible story of a surprise that changes everything, we want to connect with you. Please take a moment to comment below and let us know which beautiful city you're watching from. We truly want to know how far our story has managed to travel. And if you feel a connection to this story, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel so you never miss a chapter, and share this video with someone you think will be touched by it. You know, sometimes destiny has a funny way of showing up, not with a gentle knock, but with the roar of a V12 engine and a scent of expensive perfume. For Joe Ray, a straight-as-an-arrow mechanic whose reputation was built on sweat and integrity, this Tuesday started like any other. The sun was just beginning to warm the grease-stained concrete of his garage, a place where honesty was the only currency that truly mattered. It was a simple life, but it was his, a world away from the one he'd once known, a world he'd tried hard to forget. Then, it rolled in. A sleek, foreign sports car, the kind of machine that costs more than his entire business. The job promised to be a costly one, a real challenge that could set him up for months. This was the kind of opportunity a small-time mechanic dreams of. A little bit of overcoming the odds, you could say. Joe Ray felt a rare spark of excitement. This was his chance to prove his skill on a whole new level. He grabbed his notepad, ready to greet the owner, completely unaware of the plot twist life was about to throw his way. Out of the driver's seat stepped a woman who carried herself with an air of untouchable privilege. And just like that, the air in the garage got heavy. It was Rebecca Hayes. The name alone was a ghost, a remnant of a past filled with torment and humiliation. The rich heir who had been the architect of his high school misery, the bully who had made his life a living hell. It was a surprise so profound, it felt like a punch to the gut, a cruel joke played by the universe itself. He stood there for a moment, clipboard in hand, completely shocked. Of all the garages in all the cities, she had to walk into his. Years had passed, but the sting of memory was still there, a secret scar he never showed anyone. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, a fantasy of revenge where he'd be the one in control, the one with the power. But reality was far more complicated, wasn't it? The past and present were colliding right here, next to a faulty fuel injector. Suddenly, this wasn't just a job anymore. It was a test. A test of his professionalism, his composure, and perhaps his capacity for forgiveness or retribution. The emotional weight of the moment was crushing. He could turn her away, tell her to take her fancy car and her bad memories somewhere else. That would be the easy way out, the simple act of self-preservation. But something held him back, a whisper of a different kind of destiny at play. He took a deep breath, the smell of oil and gasoline a familiar comfort in the sudden chaos of his mind. He had to make a choice. Would this be a story of revenge, a chance to finally settle an old score? Or could it be something else entirely? He squared his shoulders, a quiet resolve hardening in his eyes. He was no longer that helpless kid. He was Joe Ray, the best damn mechanic in town, and this was his garage. The stage was set for a confrontation years in the making. Now picture this: Joe Ray's garage wasn't just a place of work, it was a sanctuary built on trust. It was a humble, no-frills space where the smell of motor oil was like incense, and the clanking of wrenches was a familiar hymn. His integrity was his currency, and in this small community, he was a wealthy man. Every car that left his shop was a testament to his dedication, a rolling advertisement for his honesty. This was a world of tangible results, of problems solved with calloused hands and a sharp mind. It was a life of purpose, far from the shadows of his past. Contrast this with the universe Rebecca Hayes inhabited. Hers was a life of effortless wealth, a gilded cage of privilege where problems were solved with a phone call, not with a toolkit. Her world was one of fleeting trends, superficial connections, and the quiet, gnawing emptiness that often accompanies having everything and valuing nothing. She was a rich heir, a title that defined her entire existence, yet she'd never truly earned a single thing. Her currency was her family name, a power she wielded without understanding its weight or its consequences. You see, in Joe Ray's world, respect was earned through action. He was the mechanic you called when you were stranded, the one who'd give you a fair price, even when you were desperate. He remembered his customers' names, asked about their families, and treated their beat-up sedans with the same care as a luxury vehicle. This foundation of kindness and reliability was something Rebecca's money could never buy. Her life was transactional, his was relational. And that, right there, is a difference that changes everything. For Joe Ray, overcoming challenges was a daily routine, from a tricky engine diagnostic to making payroll at the end of the month. Each small victory was a brick in the foundation of his self-worth. For Rebecca, challenges were inconveniences to be delegated away. She hadn't been tested, hadn't been forged in the fires of adversity. Her strength was brittle, untested. This vast difference in their life experiences was a chasm between them, an invisible barrier that made their reunion all the more charged with a strange, unspoken tension. There was a quiet dignity to Joe Ray's life, a sense of peace that came from knowing his own value without needing a bank statement to prove it. He was grounded, connected to the real world in a way Rebecca could only imagine. While she chased fleeting happiness in designer stores and exclusive parties, he found satisfaction in the purr of a perfectly tuned engine. This fundamental disconnect between their realities was the stage upon which their unexpected story was about to unfold. A story that was about to get a whole lot more complicated. And so, as the shadow of her luxury car fell across his workshop floor, it was more than just a vehicle needing repair. It was a collision of two galaxies, a meeting of two souls shaped by vastly different forces. One was built on a foundation of hard-earned respect, the other on the precarious stilts of inherited privilege. The silence between them was thick with unspoken history, and the air crackled with the promise of either a painful reckoning or an impossible connection. The question was, who would make the first move? Rebecca Hayes finally broke the silence, her voice as smooth and cold as the polished chrome on her car. She walked toward him, her heels clicking in arrogant rhythm on the concrete floor, a sound that didn't belong there. She looked right through Joe Ray, not a flicker of recognition in her eyes. To her, he wasn't a person with a past, especially not one that included her. He was just the help, a nameless mechanic meant to serve her needs. This casual dismissal was a fresh wave of humiliation, a stark reminder of their old dynamic. "I need this fixed, and I need it done fast," she said, her tone dripping with the condescending authority of someone who has never been told no. She detailed the issues with her high-end sports car, using vague, impatient terms, as if the very act of explaining was beneath her. She waved a hand dismissively at the engine, her bracelets jangling, a sound of casual wealth that grated on Joe's ears. For her, this was a minor annoyance. For him, it was a ghost from the past demanding his attention, a bully in a new designer suit. He just listened, his face an unreadable mask of professionalism. Inside, a storm of emotions was raging. Every word she spoke, every entitled gesture, brought back the sting of old wounds. It would have been so easy to let his anger show, to indulge in a small slice of revenge by refusing the job or matching her arrogance with his own. But that wasn't who he was anymore. Overcoming that impulse was a victory in itself, a testament to the man he had become despite the boy she had once tried to break. He simply nodded, grabbing a diagnostic tablet. "It'll take a look, Ms. Hayes," he replied, his voice even and steady. Using her last name was a deliberate choice, a way to establish a professional boundary and keep the emotional turmoil at bay. He was no longer the boy she could push around. He was a business owner, a skilled professional. This subtle shift in power dynamics hung in the air, a secret that only he was aware of. For now he had the upper hand, and she didn't even know they were playing a game. Rebecca seemed momentarily taken aback by his calm demeanor, her brow furrowing for a split second. She clearly expected a different kind of interaction, perhaps one with more groveling or intimidation. She was used to people falling over themselves to please the rich heir. Joe Ray's quiet confidence was unsettling to her, an unexpected variable in her perfectly controlled world. She watched him for a moment, a flicker of something annoyance, curiosity, in her eyes before she turned away. As he popped the hood, the intricate machinery of the engine was a welcome distraction. Here, in this world of pistons and wires, things made sense. Problems had solutions, and logic always won. It was a far cry from the messy, illogical world of human emotions and unresolved history. He focused on the task at hand, letting his expertise take over. But he knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that the real problem wasn't under the hood. It was standing right behind him. Despite her attitude, Joe Ray's expertise began to shine the moment his hands hovered over the engine. He wasn't just looking, he was listening, sensing the subtle disharmonies in the machine's rhythm. It was a language he understood better than words. While Rebecca had complained about a simple performance lag, Joe's trained ear picked up something else, a deeper, more insidious issue that she was completely unaware of. This was his territory, and here, he was the one with the knowledge and the power. He was more than just a mechanic, he was a master of his craft. He connected the diagnostic tool, and the data confirmed his suspicions. It wasn't the spark plugs or the fuel line, as a lesser mechanic might have assumed. It was a complex underlying flaw in the transmission's electronic control unit, a secret problem, hidden from plain sight. A problem that, if left unfixed, could lead to catastrophic failure. It was a detail her dealership had missed, a nuance only a true expert would catch. The surprise of finding it gave him a quiet sense of satisfaction. He remained completely professional, his face betraying none of the inner turmoil or the satisfaction of his discovery. He approached her, tablet in hand, and began to explain the issue in clear, concise terms. He didn't use jargon to intimidate her or talk down to her. He simply stated the facts, his voice calm and authoritative. For the first time, Rebecca Hayes was being told a truth she couldn't argue with or buy her way out of. and it was coming from the person she had dismissed just moments before. She looked at the data on the screen, then back at him, a flicker of disbelief in her eyes. "Are you sure?" she asked, her arrogance momentarily replaced by a sliver of vulnerability. The dealership had charged her a fortune and told her everything was fine. The idea that this humble mechanic had found something they'd missed was a plot twist her privileged worldview couldn't easily process. It was a small but significant moment of overcoming her own prejudice, even if she wouldn't admit it. "Impositive," Joe Ray said, his confidence unshakable. "I can show you the error logs. The repair is complex. It will require custom parts and some time." He laid it all out, no tricks, no hidden fees. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated competence. He wasn't just fixing a car, he was dismantling her preconceived notions of him, piece by piece. This interaction was becoming far more emotional and complex than a simple business transaction. She was silent for a long moment, processing the information. The power dynamic in the room had irrevocably shifted. He wasn't just a grease-stained worker anymore, he was an expert, the only one who could solve a problem she didn't even know she had. This newfound respect, begrudging as it was, hung in the air between them. But just as this fragile truce was forming, the sound of another expensive car pulling up shattered the quiet. Her world was about to come crashing into his once more. Just then, two of Rebecca's wealthy friends, a man and a woman dressed in designer clothes, strolled into the garage as if they owned the place. They surveyed the humble surroundings with open disdain, their expressions a mixture of amusement and disgust. "Becca, darling, what is this quaint little place?" the woman drawled, wrinkling her nose at the smell of oil. "Couldn't you find somewhere cleaner?" The condescension was thick enough to cut with a knife, and their laughter echoed off the concrete walls. A fresh wave of humiliation washed over Joe Ray. They spotted Joe, and the mockery became more direct. "Is this the guy?" the man asked Rebecca, looking Joe up and down as if he were an interesting piece of furniture. "Seriously? You're letting him touch your car?" They didn't even try to lower their voices. They were performing for Rebecca, reinforcing the social hierarchy they all understood. They were the elite, the rich heirs, and he was the lowly mechanic, a prop in their afternoon amusement. The sting of being treated like a nobody was an old, familiar wound. Rebecca looked uncomfortable, a slight flush creeping up her neck. A part of her was clearly embarrassed by her friend's blatant cruelty, but the bully in her, the one who craved their approval, kept her silent. She offered a weak smile, trapped between her dawning respect for Joe's skill and her lifelong allegiance to this world of shallow arrogance. Joe Ray, however, didn't flinch. He simply met their gazes with a quiet, unyielding dignity that seemed to confuse them. He didn't get angry, he didn't get defensive. He just stood there, grounded in his own self-worth. He handled their insults with a calm that was more powerful than any retort. He simply wiped his hands on a rag and said, "I'll get to work on the diagnostic then, Ms. Hayes. Excuse me." And with that, he turned back to the car, effectively dismissing them and their petty games. His refusal to be drawn into their drama, to be humiliated on their terms, was a surprise to everyone, especially Rebecca. It unnerved her. She had never seen someone so unaffected by the judgment of her social circle. His strength was a secret she was just beginning to uncover. Her friends, finding no sport in a target that wouldn't react, quickly grew bored. They exchanged a look, whispered something to Rebecca about meeting for drinks later, and swept out of the garage as quickly as they had arrived. They left behind a trail of expensive perfume and a heavy, awkward silence. The contrast between their cheap insults and Joe's quiet strength was stark, and it left Rebecca feeling strangely ashamed. This emotional plot twist was not something she had anticipated. Now she was alone with him again, the echo of her friend's mockery hanging between them. She watched as he began to meticulously work on her car, his focus absolute. He wasn't playing for an audience or seeking approval. He was just a man who took pride in his work, a man whose character was being revealed in the most unexpected of ways. For the first time, she started to wonder about the story behind the mechanic, about the destiny that had brought them back together in this dusty, unassuming place. As the afternoon light streamed through the garage windows, Joe Ray became completely absorbed in his work. He moved with a practiced grace, his hands deftly navigating the complex innards of the engine. It was during this deep focus, while checking the car's interior for any related electronic faults, that his fingers brushed against something cold and metallic wedged deep between the driver's seat and the center console. He carefully retrieved it, his brow furrowing in curiosity. It was a locket, small and silver, clearly of sentimental value. He opened the delicate clasp. Inside were two tiny, faded photographs, one of a much younger Rebecca with a woman who looked like her mother, and the other of an elderly couple, smiling warmly. A secret glimpse into a life he knew nothing about. His first instinct, the one born from years of being humiliated by her, was a whisper of revenge. He could keep it, sell it, or simply throw it away. It would be a small, petty victory, a way to inflict a tiny fraction of the pain she had caused him. It was a tempting thought, a dark impulse he had to fight. But then, another thought pushed through, stronger and clearer. That wasn't who he was. Overcoming that darkness was the entire point of the life he had built. He looked at the locket again, not as an object of revenge, but as something precious that someone had lost. He saw the love in the tiny photographs, the history it held. He thought of his own mother and the simple treasures she held dear. This act of kindness, this choice, was a defining moment, a quiet act of redemption for the boy who had been so hurt. Instead of pocketing it, he took the locket over to his workbench. He found a soft cloth and, with the same gentle precision he used on the most delicate engine parts, he carefully cleaned away the dust and grime. He polished the silver until it gleamed, restoring the shine to the forgotten object. He didn't do it for her or for any hope of reward. He did it for himself because it was the right thing to do. It was a simple act, but it spoke volumes about his character, a story of integrity she would never have believed. He then placed the polished locket carefully in a small, clean plastic bag and set it aside on his desk, right next to her keys. He wouldn't mention it until the time was right. It was a small surprise, a detail that would wait for its moment. The destiny of this object and what it represented was now in his hands. He felt a strange sense of peace, a quiet confidence in the choice he had made. He had chosen kindness over bitterness, integrity over revenge. He turned his attention back to the car, the complex repair ahead of him. The work was going to take longer than he initially thought, as the custom parts were proving difficult to source quickly. The delay was unavoidable, a technical reality. But he had a feeling that Rebecca Hayes, a woman used to getting everything instantly, would not see it that way. He braced himself for another confrontation, knowing this quiet act of decency would soon be put to the test. Just as he predicted, Rebecca returned late the next day, her patience clearly worn thin. She marched into the garage, her arms crossed, a thunderous expression on her face. "Why isn't my car ready?" she demanded, her voice sharp and accusatory. There was no greeting, no politeness, just the raw, unfiltered entitlement of the rich heir who believed the world revolved around her schedule. She didn't see a dedicated mechanic working hard. She saw an obstacle, a problem that was inconveniencing her. "I told you this was a complex repair," Joe Ray started to explain, but she cut him off. "Complex? Or are you just slow?" She shot back. "I know how this works. You find a complex problem, you drag out the repair, and you inflate the bill. You probably think because I have money, you can take me for a ride." Her words were a direct assault on his integrity, the very foundation of his life. It was a prejudiced, ugly view, reinforcing her belief that people like him were inherently dishonest, and looking to scam people like her. She was the bully once again. The accusation stung more than he would ever let on. After all the care he had taken, after the moment of kindness with her locket, this was what she thought of him. He felt a flash of the old humiliation, the familiar feeling of being judged and found wanting by her. It was a deeply emotional moment, a test of his hard-won composure. The desire for revenge, for putting her in her place, flared up again, hotter this time. But he took a deep breath, anchoring himself in the present, in the man he was now. He saw the fear and mistrust in her eyes, the ingrained prejudice of her privileged world. She genuinely believed he was trying to cheat her. It wasn't just about him, it was about her entire worldview, a cynical fortress she had built around herself. Arguing would be pointless. Yelling would only prove her right in her own mind. He realized that the only way to fight this battle was not with anger, but with undeniable truth. The plot twist wouldn't come from a shouting match, but from a quiet act of honesty. "The custom parts I ordered haven't arrived yet," he said calmly, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "They're specific to this model and have to be shipped from Germany. I can show you the tracking information if you'd like." He refused to be baited, to sink to her level. He was a professional and he would act like one, even if she was acting like a spoiled child. His calm response seemed to disarm her slightly, her anger faltering in the face of his unruffled demeanor. But he wasn't done yet. He knew he had one more card to play, one that would change the entire dynamic of their conversation. He walked over to his desk, his mind set on a course of action that would either shatter her prejudice or prove it was unbreakable. He picked up the small clear bag, the gleaming silver locket inside. This was it. The moment of truth. The surprise that would leave her utterly and completely speechless. Joe Ray calmly walked back over to her, extending his hand. "I believe this is yours," he said, his voice devoid of any triumph or accusation. "I found it lodged in the seat rail when I was working on the interior." He opened his palm to reveal the small plastic bag containing the polished silver locket. He then simply handed it to her, his gaze steady and direct, leaving her speechless. The air in the garage suddenly felt thick, charged with a silence that was louder than her earlier accusations. Rebecca stared at the locket in her hand as if it were a ghost. She was utterly shocked, her mind struggling to reconcile the man she had just accused of being a thief with the man who was now returning a precious, lost possession. Her fingers trembled slightly as she took it from the bag. She had thought it was gone forever, a priceless link to her late mother, and she hadn't even realized it was missing. The kindness of the gesture, coming on the heels of her own ugly accusations, was like a physical blow. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion, shame, and a dawning, unfamiliar emotion. Respect. Her carefully constructed image of him as a greedy, opportunistic mechanic shattered in an instant. His honesty was a blinding light, exposing the darkness of her own prejudice. She had been so ready for a fight, so certain of his motives, and he had met her aggression with quiet, unimpeachable integrity. It was the most profound surprise of her life. I thought I lost this years ago," she stammered, the words barely a whisper. All the fire, all the arrogant certainty, was gone, replaced by a raw, unguarded vulnerability. This simple act of decency had done what no argument ever could. It had completely disarmed her. In that moment, the rich heir and the humble mechanic were gone, and all that was left were two people, standing in a garage, connected by an unexpected act of grace. A strange emotional destiny seemed to be unfolding. Joe Ray simply nodded. "I figured it was important," he said, and then, giving her space, he turned back to his work. He didn't gloat. He didn't say "I told you so." He didn't use the moment to make her feel small. This act of grace was, in its own way, the ultimate form of overcoming. He had risen above the bitterness of their past and the ugliness of their present, choosing a higher path. His redemption wasn't about revenge, it was about proving, quietly and definitively, the quality of his character. Rebecca stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, the cool metal of the locket a heavy weight in her palm. The garage, which had seemed so grimy and foreign before, now looked different. The man she had dismissed and insulted now seemed larger than life. Her world had been tilted on its axis, and she was left grappling with a feeling she wasn't prepared, for she had been completely and utterly wrong about Joe Ray, and now she had no idea what to do next. Stunned by his kindness, Rebecca's entire demeanor shifted. The hostility vanished, replaced by a quiet, contemplative unease. She left the garage that day without another word, but the encounter had burrowed deep into her mind. She couldn't shake the image of him handing her the locket, his calm dignity a stark contrast to her own behavior. This single act of honesty forced her to question everything she thought she knew about him and perhaps about herself. A seed of curiosity had been planted, so she started finding excuses to visit the garage. At first, it was a quick call to check on the status of the parts, a flimsy pretext for hearing his voice. Then, she began stopping by in person, using the excuse that she was in the neighborhood. She'd bring coffee, an awkward gesture of peace, and would stand at a distance, observing him as he worked. She was a woman adrift, her old certainties washed away, and this humble mechanic and his garage had somehow become her unlikely anchor. She watched him interact with other customers, a silent observer to his daily life. She saw his easy smile with an elderly neighbor, his patient explanation of a complex repair to a worried young mother, and his firm but fair negotiation with a part supplier. In her world, every interaction was a transaction, a power play. But here, in Joe's world, things were different. There was a current of genuine connection, of mutual respect, that was entirely foreign to her. This was a secret language of community she'd never learned. Each visit chipped away another piece of the arrogant, rich heir she had been. She saw the pride he took in his work, the focus in his eyes, the strength in his hands. He was building a life, not just a business, with a foundation of integrity she was beginning to envy. It was a slow, emotional process of discovery. This wasn't a love story she was witnessing, it was a story of character, of a man whose worth wasn't measured by his bank account, but by the strength of his principles. Joe Ray noticed her frequent visits, of course. He was wary at first, unsure of her motives. Was this some new game, another way to exert her power? He kept his distance, remaining polite but professional, the memory of the bully still a faint shadow in the back of his mind. But he also saw the change in her eyes. The hard, condescending edge was gone, replaced by a hesitant curiosity. A silent, unspoken dialogue began to form between them, filled with questions she was too proud to ask and answers he was not yet ready to give. She was drawn to him, to the authenticity he represented, a stark contrast to the superficiality of her own life. She felt a pull, a sense of destiny she couldn't explain. She was beginning to see the man, not the mechanic, and she was both fascinated and terrified by what she was discovering. She knew she was standing on the edge of something significant, a plot twist in her own life story. And she had a feeling that the next discovery would change her forever. One sweltering afternoon, Rebecca arrived to see an elderly woman, Mrs. Gable, standing by her ancient, sputtering sedan, her face etched with worry. "Oh, Joe Ray," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I don't know what he'll do. The estimate from the dealership was more than my monthly pension." Rebecca watched from the doorway, unseen, expecting Joe to give her a sympathetic but firm price. After all, he was running a business, and sentimentality didn't pay the bills. This was the logic of her world. But Joe Ray didn't even hesitate. He put a comforting hand on the woman's shoulder and gave her a warm smile. "Don't you worry about a thing, Mary," he said gently. "It's probably just a loose connection. Let me take a look. No charge, of course." Just promise me you'll bake me some of those oatmeal cookies I like." He then spent the next hour patiently working on the car, replacing a worn-out belt he had in the back, refusing to take a single penny for the part or his labor. Rebecca stood frozen, completely shocked. This act of generosity was so foreign to her world that it felt like it was from another planet. In her circle, every favor had a price. Every gesture was a calculated move. Witnessing this pure, unselfish act of kindness was a profound emotional experience. It wasn't a grand gesture for an audience, it was a quiet moment of human decency. It forced her to look at her own life, at her own values, and see the gaping emptiness within. She saw the genuine gratitude on Mrs. Gable's face, the relief that was worth more than any amount of money. And she saw the quiet satisfaction on Joe's face, a look of fulfillment that she had never seen on the faces of her wealthy, powerful friends. He possessed a richness that had nothing to do with money. This realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The humble mechanic she had once looked down upon was, in every way that truly mattered, a wealthier person than she would ever be. This moment was the final catalyst, the undeniable proof that her judgment of him had been catastrophically wrong. It wasn't just about the locket anymore. This was about his fundamental character, his very soul. The redemption she was witnessing wasn't his, didn't need it. It was her own. She was the one who was broken, who was poor in spirit. And for the first time, she felt a desperate, aching need to change, to be better. She slipped away before they could see her, her mind reeling. The world no longer looked the same. The values she had been raised with, the pursuit of wealth and status, now seemed hollow and meaningless. Joe Ray's simple act of kindness had revealed a truth she could no longer ignore. But just as this profound shift was taking root, her old habits of suspicion and mistrust were about to be tested one last time by a conversation she was never meant to hear. A few days later, still reeling from what she had witnessed, Rebecca stopped by the garage again. This time, however, she stayed in her rental car, hesitating, unsure of what to say or how to act. As she sat there, she saw Joe Ray on the phone, pacing near the open garage door. He was speaking in an animated, excited voice, and she could only catch snippets of the conversation carried on the breeze. The words she did hear, however, were enough to send a jolt of her old cynicism right through her. "It's gonna be huge," Joe was saying, a wide grin on his face. "Yes, the whole community is chipping in. We're looking at a huge payout by the end of the week." A huge payout. The phrase landed like a stone in Rebecca's stomach. Her mind, still conditioned by years of distrust, immediately jumped to the worst possible conclusion. He was talking about her bill. He had been playing her all along, his kindness a clever act to soften her up before hitting her with an astronomical repair cost. The old bully in her reared its ugly head. "See?" her inner voice sneered. "You were right all along. People like him are all the same." The fragile trust she had started to build crumbled in an instant, replaced by a bitter, familiar sense of betrayal. She felt foolish, naive for having believed he was different. The humiliation of being potentially scammed felt even worse than her initial embarrassment. It was a painful, emotional plot twist that confirmed her darkest, most prejudiced beliefs. She was about to storm out of the car and confront him, to unleash all her hurt and anger. But then she stopped. The image of him with Mrs. Gable flashed in her mind, genuine kindness in his eyes. The two pictures didn't add up. The man who fixed an old woman's car for free and the man scheming for a huge payout couldn't be the same person. Could they? For the first time in her life, she gave someone the benefit of the doubt, a secret act of faith. Instead of confronting him, she waited. After he hung up, one of his regular customers, a local firefighter, pulled up. "Hey Joe," he called out. "How's the charity drive for the youth center coming along? Are we gonna hit that goal?" Joe's face lit up. "We're almost there," he replied enthusiastically. The fundraiser this weekend should give us that huge payout we need to get them those new computers. The truth hit Rebecca like a lightning bolt, leaving her utterly shocked. The huge payout wasn't for him. It was for a local charity drive he had organized. He was using his own garage, his own time, to help kids in the community. The wave of shame that washed over Rebecca was overwhelming. She had been so quick to judge, so ready to believe the worst. Her misinterpretation revealed more about her own damaged worldview than it ever did about him. And just as she was processing this latest humbling revelation, another car pulled up, this one sleek, black, and menacingly familiar. Out of the black sedan stepped Marcus, Rebecca's fiancé. He was the epitome of inherited wealth and arrogance, a man who moved through the world as if it were his personal property. He spotted Rebecca's rental and then fixed his cold gaze on Joe Ray, his expression one of pure disdain. "Is this the place?" He sneered to Rebecca, ignoring Joe completely. "I thought I told you to take it to a professional." Marcus was the bully she was used to, the kind of man her father approved of, and seeing him here, in Joe's world, felt horribly wrong. Marcus strode over to Joe, looking him up and down with a contemptuous smirk. "So you're the mechanic," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Listen, I don't have time for games. Rebecca needs her car back, now." He then pulled out a thick wad of cash from his wallet, peeling off several $100 bills. "Here," he said, shoving the money toward Joe. "A little incentive to finish the job faster. Consider it a bribe. I don't care what you call it, just get it done." Joe Ray didn't even look at the money. He simply met Marcus's gaze with a cool, steady calm that seemed to infuriate the other man. "My work isn't rushed," Joe said, his voice low and firm. "And my principles aren't for sale." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry. He simply stated his truth with an unshakable confidence that Marcus's money and power couldn't touch. It was a quiet, powerful act of overcoming the very values that Marcus represented. The rejection left Marcus momentarily stunned, then his face turned red with fury. "Do you have any idea who I am?" he sputtered, his voice rising. "I could buy and sell this pathetic little garage with my pocket change." The threat was clear, an ugly display of power and intimidation. But Joe Ray didn't back down. "This pathetic little garage isn't for sale either," he replied calmly, turning his attention back to his work, effectively dismissing Marcus as if he were nothing more than a minor annoyance. Rebecca witnessed the entire exchange, and she was utterly mortified. Marcus's behavior, which she once might have seen as powerful or commanding, now looked vulgar and weak. He was trying to intimidate a man whose character he couldn't even begin to comprehend. In that moment, the contrast between the two men was painfully clear. Marcus, the rich heir, was spiritually bankrupt, while Joe Ray, the humble mechanic, possessed a strength and a richness of character that her fiancé's money could never, ever buy. This was the final, undeniable plot twist. Seeing the man she was supposed to marry try to bribe the man she was beginning to admire was a moment of shocking clarity. She realized she was engaged to a bully, a man who reflected the worst parts of her own past behavior. The destiny she thought was set in stone now felt like a prison. And in the quiet dignity of Joe Ray's refusal, she saw a different path, a different future. A future she knew, with sudden certainty, she had to fight for. Witnessing that raw, ugly exchange was like having cold water thrown in her face. Rebecca was mortified by her fiancé's behavior, but more than that, she was ashamed of herself for ever thinking his brand of arrogant power was something to admire. In that single defining moment, she realized Joe Ray possessed a strength and character her money could never buy. It wasn't just about his skill as a mechanic or his kindness, it was about his soul, his unshakable core of integrity. He was everything Marcus was not. She saw her entire future with Marcus flash before her eyes, a hollow existence of lavish parties, transactional relationships, and the constant, soul-crushing pretense of their social class. It was a future devoid of the genuine connection and simple decency she had witnessed here in this dusty garage. That life, which had once seemed like her destiny, now felt like a cage. Joe Ray, with his grease-stained hands and unwavering principles, represented a freedom she hadn't known she was craving. A freedom to be real. The realization was as terrifying as it was liberating. The path forward required an immense act of overcoming her family's expectations, her social obligations, and the insecure, shallow person she had been for so long. It meant trading a life of guaranteed comfort for a future that was uncertain but authentic. For the first time, the rich heir was faced with a choice that truly mattered, a choice that couldn't be made with her father's money, only with her own courage. After Marcus stormed off in a cloud of impotent rage, a heavy silence fell between Rebecca and Joe. She knew what she had to do. The first step toward her own redemption had to be a genuine, heartfelt apology. Not just for her accusations in the garage, but for everything. For the years of torment in high school, for being the bully who tried to break the spirit of the very man who was now showing her what it meant to be strong. It was a debt that had been left unpaid for far too long. She took a tentative step toward him, her heart pounding in her chest. The words felt stuck in her throat, heavy with years of guilt. This was harder than any business deal, more daunting than any social event. This was about facing the very worst part of herself, exposed in the quiet judgment of a good man's gaze. This was her chance to finally close a painful chapter of their shared history, and just maybe, start writing a new one. A love story, perhaps, built on the ashes of a painful past. "Joe," she began, her voice barely a whisper, but clear in the sudden stillness of the garage. "Can we talk? There's something I should have said a long time ago." His expression remained unreadable, but he stopped what he was doing and gave her his full attention. The air was thick with unspoken emotions, the weight of the past and the fragile hope of the future hanging between them, waiting for the truth to finally be spoken. "I am so sorry," Rebecca said, the words tumbling out in a rush of raw, unvarnished emotion. "For everything. For how I treated you in high school, for being that awful person. For what I said when I came in here, and for ever doubting you. There's no excuse for my behavior, then or now. I was a bully, and I was wrong." She finally said it, the ugly truth she had carried for years. It was a confession, an act of surrender, and the first step toward her own personal redemption. Joe Ray listened, his expression softening as he heard the genuine remorse in her voice. He saw the tears welling in her eyes, and he knew this wasn't a performance. This was real. He had held onto the anger and hurt from his past for so long, a secret shield to protect himself. But seeing her standing before him, stripped of her arrogance and privilege, offering a true apology, he felt that old anger begin to dissolve. It was a strange, unexpected release, a weight lifting from his own shoulders as well as hers. This led to their first genuine conversation, an honest and emotional exchange that lasted for over an hour. She told him about the pressures of her family, the hollowness of her life, not as an excuse, but as an explanation. He, in turn, shared a little about his journey, the struggle of building his business from nothing, the pride he felt in his work. They weren't the rich heir and the mechanic anymore, or the bully and the victim. They were just Joe Ray and Rebecca Hayes, two people discovering an unexpected connection. It was a conversation filled with vulnerability and surprise. He was shocked by her self-awareness and the depth of her regret. She was shocked by his capacity for grace, his willingness to listen without judgment. They discovered a shared loneliness, a common desire for something more authentic in their lives. A fragile bridge was being built between their two disparate worlds, a bridge founded on honesty and a shared hope for a different kind of future. The seeds of a true love story were being sown. As they talked, the years of bad blood seemed to wash away, replaced by a tentative, blossoming friendship. A spark ignited between them, something real and powerful that had nothing to do with their pasts or their bank accounts. It was a connection of two souls who had seen the worst, and surprisingly, were now seeing the best in each other. Their shared destiny, which had started with an act of cruelty, was now twisting into something beautiful and unforeseen. When she finally left that evening, the air between them was different. It was lighter, filled with possibility. The garage no longer felt like a place of confrontation, but a place of healing. They had faced the ghosts of their past together and had come out the other side, changed. The car was still there, the final repair waiting to be completed, but now, the thought of it being finished brought a new kind of anxiety for both of them. The day the car was finally finished arrived with a mix of anticipation and melancholy. The custom parts from Germany had arrived, and with his signature precision, Joe Ray completed the complex repair. The engine purred with a power and smoothness it hadn't had before. The job was done. He wiped the last smudge of grease from the fender, a strange sense of finality washing over him. Their daily interactions, the tentative conversations, the shared cups of kefir of that, was about to come to an end. Rebecca received his call with a knot in her stomach. "It's ready," was all he said, his voice professional yet tinged with an emotion she couldn't quite place. As she drove to the garage, she braced herself for the bill, but for the first time in her life, the cost was the last thing on her mind. She was now more worried about the end of her interactions with Joe Ray than the number on the invoice. This humble garage had become a sanctuary, and she wasn't ready to leave it. She had made some big decisions in the last few days. The encounter with Marcus had been the final straw. She had called off their toxic engagement, a monumental act of overcoming her family's expectations and reclaiming her own life. The ensuing firestorm with her parents was brutal, but she stood her ground, fueled by a newfound strength she had discovered within herself, a strength she attributed to watching Joe. She was finally shedding the skin of the rich heir. When she walked into the garage, the polished car was waiting, looking better than new. Joe was standing by his workbench, holding a single piece of paper. The final bill. Her heart hammered in her chest. This was it. The end of their story. The transaction would be complete, and she would have no more excuses to come back. The thought of driving away and never seeing him again was surprisingly painful, a deep, emotional ache she hadn't expected. "It's all set," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. There was an awkwardness between them, a shared reluctance to say goodbye. The professional boundary they had started with was now blurred by genuine affection and a deep, unspoken connection. This final moment felt less like a business deal and more like the turning of a page in the book of their shared destiny, with both of them uncertain and terrified of what the next chapter held, or if there would even be one. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves, and walked toward him. "Thank you, Joe, for everything," she said, her voice filled with a meaning that went far beyond the car repair. He simply nodded, his eyes holding hers for a long moment, and then he handed her the invoice. She looked down at the paper in her hand, her mind racing, preparing herself for the number, but even more so for the finality it represented. Rebecca's eyes scanned the invoice, and she stopped, utterly shocked. She read it again, sure she was mistaken. The total was shockingly low. It barely covered the cost of the custom parts, with a negligible amount for labor. It made no sense. For a repair this complex, on a car this expensive, the bill should have been astronomical. She looked up at Joe Ray, her face a canvas of confusion. "Joe, this can't be right," she said, her voice trembling slightly. This is nothing." Joe Ray gave her a small, genuine smile, the first one he had truly let himself show her. "The bill is right," he said softly. The truly costly part of this job wasn't the engine. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the quiet garage. The most costly part was us facing our past, and him marking that part as paid in full. Humbled, Tears welled in Rebecca's eyes as she finally understood. His kindness was his final, most powerful statement. This wasn't about revenge, it was about grace and redemption. In that moment, she realized his true worth was priceless. His integrity, his kindness, his strength, these were things her father's fortune could never buy. She looked around the humble garage, a place she had once scorned, and saw it for what it truly was, the heart of a good man's world, a place built on honesty and hard work. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that this was where she wanted to be. Not as a customer, but as a partner. A partner in business, and maybe a partner in life. The plot twist was not just that the bill was low, it was what she did next. With newfound resolve, Rebecca looked him straight in the eye. "I ended my engagement," she stated simply, "and have come into a significant trust fund that I now control. I was going to invest it in the stock market, but I have a much better idea." She took a deep breath. "I want to invest in you. In this garage. Let's build this together, make it the best shop in the state, but on our terms." "On your terms." Joe was the one who was shocked now. He saw the determination and sincerity in her eyes. This wasn't the spoiled rich heir from her past, this was a new Rebecca. A woman who had fought for her own redemption and was now offering him a shared future. He saw a love story beginning, not with a fairy tale kiss, but with a business proposal founded on mutual respect and a desire to build something real. Destiny had brought them full circle, from a place of pain to a place of incredible possibility. He broke into a wide, brilliant grin. "I think," he said, the word yes hanging joyfully in the air, "that's the best offer I've ever had." Rebecca laughed through her tears, a sound of pure relief and happiness. The story of the bully and the mechanic was over. A new story, their story, was just beginning. Right here in the place where their pasts collided and their futures, against all odds, decided to merge. And so we leave Joe Ray and Rebecca, not at an ending, but at a brilliant new beginning. Their journey shows us that sometimes destiny isn't a straight line, but a winding road that forces us to confront the very people we thought we'd left behind. It started with a bully and a mechanic, a rich heir and a man humiliated by his past, but it transformed into a powerful story of kindness, redemption, and overcoming. It reminds us that the biggest repairs we'll ever undertake are not on cars, but on our own hearts and histories. This story was a true emotional plot twist, wasn't it? It challenges us to think about what true wealth really is. Is it the money in our bank account or the integrity in our souls? Joe Ray, with his quiet dignity, showed us that character is a currency that never loses its value. And Rebecca's journey teaches us that it's never too late to change, to apologize, and to choose a different path. A path of love and genuine connection over privilege and expectation. Their love story wasn't born from a fairy tale, but from the messy, complicated reality of facing old wounds and choosing to heal them together. It's a powerful reminder that the best version of ourselves can often be found on the other side of our most difficult challenges. The surprise wasn't just the final bill, it was the realization that forgiveness is priceless and that a second chance can change everything. This journey of an honest mechanic and a rich heir has now come to a close, but we know the conversation is just beginning. If their story of redemption and destiny touched you, please show your support by giving this video a like. And we truly want to hear from you in the comments below. What was the moment that impacted you the most? Was it Joe's quiet act of returning the locket? Or was it Rebecca's decision to invest in his garage and in their future? Tell us, did you expect this kind of ending, or were you hoping for a different outcome? We love reading your thoughts on the Desfecho. And if you want more stories that make you feel this deeply, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. We have a whole library of past videos for you to explore, and you definitely don't want to miss the emotional stories we have coming up next. Thank you for being here with us today.